Now it's hot, not just at the front. Russians are being massively hit by glasses with a surprise. The occupiers themselves are forced to fight on old-fashioned vehicles, and in some cases even on donkeys. All this is accompanied by a lack of tactics and the old Soviet school of meat assaults. Do the Russians really not learn from their mistakes and keep stepping on the same rakes over and over again? We'll tell you more about this next.
Russian drone pilots faced a series of explosions from FPV goggles during their use.
We're opening the gray box, and I'll give it back to the girls.
Thank you for watching. And the Vitanata is disconnected. Done.
They are changing, increasing. The adaptive and drone have been directed through Russian volunteers' organic organs for directly on the front line of combat engagement. They will activate the devices when the Achilles fan is turned on.
According to sources, the operation is being carried out by specialists from the HUR in Ukrainian intelligence.
Now, the pilots of the Russian Federation's FPV drones are starting to face God's wrath en masse for the innocent people they have killed and the atrocities they commit. Soon, there will be many more such facts, because now, the Bandera hideouts, where they make surprise goggles for the Russian occupiers, are not only in the Ukrainian Carpathians, but also in Russian Siberia.
The first communication from the Belgorod region. Then already...
According to information from open sources, at least 8 pilots have been affected by the surprise goggles, and the operation is currently still ongoing, with additional updates expected.
And the positive result is that, according to the Russian side, more than 80 given points. And equipped, I emphasize once again, well, the old island table with remote control was transferred to a mediocre operator unit in the White Army of the occupying country.
It is claimed that Ukrainian scouts were inspired by the experience of their Israeli colleagues, who planted explosives in the pages of members of the terrorist group Hezbollah.
Pagers are practically no longer used in the world, but Hezbollah still uses them. When you press the button, and the only one who will suffer? It's the terrorist himself. Even if his wife or children are nearby, only he will suffer.
As we know, Russian troops do not use pagers, and the entire Ukrainian intelligence chose not just...
Up to 70% of the personnel costs for armored vehicles are related to operational work. Yes, Ukrainian and Russian are spoken by the operators of drones and artificial goods, if I can put it that way, for its preparation. Serious investment is needed, and most importantly, time.
Those who came with war to a peaceful foreign country seem to be getting what they deserve. And who knows what surprises the Russians are expecting from military equipment. Next.
In the attack on the old rams of Chela. Now, for the so-called Second Army in the world, this has become a reality. Here's one of the latest vivid examples from the Luhansk direction. The liberators are charging forward in pink Zhigulis. Russian military equipment stocks are rapidly depleting and cannot be replenished. So the only solution is the civilian automotive industry.
Lada cars, not only Zhiguli models but also the slightly more powerful Niva, began to appear in large quantities in Russian assault units, as a few months ago, stocks of armored vehicles began to run low.
The reasons for such losses are Ukrainian drones, which on the front line are organizing a real hunt for at least one Russian tank.
According to the Russian side, there is total superiority in IPV drones in Ukraine. This allows for negotiations in Ottawa regarding Ukraine. The numerical strength of the enemy's heavy armored vehicles is significant.
Louis publication of the American edition Forbes claims that the use of the army of Rev Zhiguls could be a turning point
When last fall the first Russian assault groups got into their Zhiguli and set off on almost suicidal attacks, the attacks by Zhiguli could be attributed to the neutral zone patrolled by drones in eastern Ukraine. In isolated cases committed by the most desperate and poorly equipped Russian units, it's no longer possible to paint such a rosy picture for the efforts of the Russian army in terms of mechanization. With losses of armored vehicles and other heavy equipment exceeding 15,000, attacks using Zhigulis are becoming increasingly common.
The losses of armored vehicles in the Russian army are about 6,000 units per year. Previously, the Kremlin made up for these losses by preserving Soviet equipment. But now, there's almost none left, because these stocks are not limitless.
The Russian Federation currently has the ability to produce heavy armored vehicles up to 200 units per year. But considering the losses on the front lines, these figures are minimal and don't even address tactical levels, the tasks of the occupying army in Ukraine. So, the Russian defense industry at the moment. Thank you. The priority is not on production, but rather on the restoration of armored vehicles. It's important to note that these are mostly old tanks like the T-55, T-54, T-62 and T-72 5 after 4, T-60, 27-2.
Of course, the 2025 assaults are different from the assaults at the beginning of a full-scale invasion. Because the occupier has realized that large mechanized breakthroughs only lead to significant losses in equipment and personnel. But the attacks on the Zhiguli also indicate that the Russian army is reaching a critical point in terms of restoring its equipment.
The normalization of attacks on Ladas is a clear sign that this turning point has been passed. With each passing day of Russia's increasingly large-scale war in Ukraine, Russians will have less and less armored vehicles, and they will increasingly rely on compact cars to transport troops into battle.
Going into an attack in Zhigulis is clearly a one-way ticket. And does anyone want this lucky ticket? It's up to the Russian soldier to decide whether to pull out or not.
The Russian Black Sea Fleet has become a real laughingstock. Ukrainian defenders have turned the Black Sea into a complete trap for the enemy. Explosions are ringing out in the ports of Crimea, and Russian sailors are panicking as they abandon their ships. Russia was definitely not prepared for this. In contrast, Ukrainians have a lot of experience with special operations and are eager to share their knowledge. You can find more details about this in our article.
The Russian cruiser Moskva and the landing ship Cesar Kunikov
and this is the missile boat Ivanovits. This is how precisely, step by step, the defense forces are destroying enemy ships. In this naval battle, we have already accounted for over 24 ships that will never be able to enter the Ukrainian Black Sea again.
As of this morning, there were no ships in the waters of the Black Sea, the waters of the Azov Sea. We haven't been observing since last year. When several attacks were happening from our side, it was quite average. The Russians, Oda, believed that there was a danger, and they, for example, withdrew even beyond the limits of the Tsemes Bay. 5 carriers of cruise missiles.
It is precisely our cruise missiles and sea drones that have become too dangerous for the Russian fleet. Because of this, the ships that are still left in Russia, the enemy hastily withdrew from occupied Crimea and the Azov Sea. Now, they are based in Novorossiysk.
Submarines and frigates and missile boats that carrying calibers. This is the main strike force. The Russians, that's exactly where they are. And the landing ships, by the way, are mostly all there. The deployment of these ships into the sea may not last long. So they went out in an hour. They deployed to the combat training area. Launched missiles, they returned back.
The destroyed and damaged Russian ships remained in occupied Crimea. There is a repair base that services the enemy fleet.
In Sevastopol, there are also several large landing ships, which were damaged, including this is the Olenigorsky Hill. Minsk is located there. And there are the ships of the water area protection, so to speak. So these are missile boats, minesweepers, missile ships, corvettes, and anti-submarine vessels to protect the base point.
The explosions have destroyed Russian military logistics. And then we also destroyed the oil products in Feodosia and Sevastopol. All of this has reduced the combat capability of the Russian army. In almost 3 years of full-scale war, the Russian Black Sea Fleet has lost 30% of its combat potential.
A third of the ships have been completely disabled. At the beginning, there were about 80 combat units. A third is actually already not in service, but an even larger number of ships sustained damage. Frigates and Makara. The FSB ships sustained damage among the patrol vessels. Of the 4 in total, only 1 was unharmed. The last was Pavel Derzhavin, who received 2 injuries in 2 days.
Russia, as a rule, hides strikes on its facilities and denies losses. But they are so extensive that it's impossible not to notice them. This also affected the families of Russians who were brought to Crimea to serve in the Navy. Now they have returned to Russia because the occupying fleet on the peninsula has practically disappeared. Lviv Sidbulayeva, we are Ukraine, Marathon United.
News? The waves crashed gently into the vestibule, she tells me.
Today, Army TV is showcasing the Swedish warship Compact 90, which is designed for patrolling both maritime and coastal areas. It's equipped for various operations, including support for special operations. And now we are moving to open the Black Sea, also for various combat social operations to support special operations. And now we are moving to open the Black Sea.
The boat is multifunctional, capable of performing a wide variety of tasks at sea. Moreover, it has shown that it can operate in any weather.
The landing craft, Combat Bow 90, is located inside the boat. Here we can easily descend into it. It's quite large, and you can even transport some cargo here. 4. The BC. After the landing compartment, the control cabin, where the commander sits and actually steers the combat boat. Next, one door opens. The second door. And now we are going outside to the bow. The ramp is lowering and the guys are disembarking.
Right now, if I hear an alarm while we're talking, in a minute we'll be ready to go. In a minute, we'll already be there.
It's like starting a car. Started, warmed, and we're good to go.
Yeah, you can probably even hear it. We constantly keep our engines ready for immediate action. Can walk in shallow water, can go out without damage to the equipment or the shore.
By the way, this boat is very fast and maneuverable. It reaches speeds of up to 40 knots, which is about 70-75 kilometers per hour. Everything is felt very strongly. You have to constantly brace yourself, hold on to something because it can easily throw you off balance.
It's very, very maneuverable. A full stop takes us about 20 meters, which is probably 1.5 hull lengths.
How
to say it? Wet. It's cold. Lonely.
Lonely, but let's put it this way. That's very interesting.
You've been in the army for a long time?
Well, I'm still talking about myself. The youngest man, I recently just turned 22.
Why in the ministry?
I absolutely love water, and I love extreme sports. I love learning.